Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Story Each Day podcast. Today's story is called Fear, Worship, and Ham for Dinner. And I wrote it on April 28th, 2014. At this point in the project, we were coming up to about 4 months of writing a story every single day. And I started to sort of hit a stride, was excited about some of these stories. This one was one that I remember being excited about when I wrote it. And looking back, it's still one that I think I'm pretty pleased with how it turned out. So, without further ado, we'll get right to it. Fear, Worship, and Ham for Dinner. Written on April 28th, 2014. For a story each day. A farmhand who worked for my dad once told me that what you fear is what you will worship. I was too young to know what the hell that meant, and have since worshipped many things: man, beast, and fallen angel. But I'm still not sure that's what he meant. The idea that fear and worship are intertwined never worked for me. There were plenty of things that I feared, but wouldn't ever bow a knee to. Most of them were things that I would have sooner pulled out my shotgun and blasted to hell than I would have knelt down and prayed to. And there were things that I would bow a knee to, but wouldn't ever in my right mind pull a gun on. Julia was one of them. I got on one knee when I proposed, and she accepted, but I didn't feel any fear. Everyone kept on telling me how to keep a wife, how to treat her, and how to make her happy, how not to drive each other insane, and how to make the other feel special. I knew how to do those things. I made sure she had everything she wanted. Every morning, I'd wake up with her arm around me. I'd sneak out of bed and tend to the animals, check for eggs, feed the pigs, milk the cows. Then I'd head back inside and we'd make breakfast. She had the most delicate smile, like an egg that had been dropped but hadn't broken, and would stay good just long enough if you cradled it and carried it alone. But cracked eggs don't last, so if you're going to use them, you have to use them right away, because they're fragile as hell. But her smile was beautiful, and I didn't care if it was fragile as hell. I liked it, and I wanted to keep it. I made sure she had everything she wanted. It was hers. If she wanted more breakfast, I'd make it for her. If she wanted new clothes, I'd buy them for her. If she wanted more time, I'd give it to her. The only time I felt fear and worship mix was when I asked her when we were going to have a kid. She laughed, and we talked, but I gave her everything she wanted, and so we didn't. Maybe someday, but not this season, she said. And not the next season either. I gave her everything she wanted. I made sure it was hers, because the only thing in hell that I didn't want to do was break that delicate smile. And so every morning, I would wake up with her arm around my chest, and I'd sneak out and tend to the animals, check for eggs, feed the pigs, milk the cows. I walked to the lawn in the early morning as the sun peeked through the south trees, her scent still wrapped around my body like a rope. But this morning was different. The pigs tore into the feed bin and came spilling out across the lawn near the fences. When I got to the lawn, I saw the feed and I saw the pigs. They lay across the barren, musty ground, sinking into their own vomit. Some of them rolled and belched and let out small squeals of morbid indulgence. They'd all overeaten, gorged to death. All except one. The single swine strolled up to me and blinked like he was expecting something. A week later, she said she wanted fresh ham to cook for dinner guests. The Franklins had just had a second child, and she'd invited them over. Of course, I said yes. I slaughtered that last pig, and we enjoyed ham for dinner with the Franklins and their 2 kids. So, Mrs. Franklin asked, after dinner, before we served dessert, any plans for growing the family? You 2 would make such great parents. No, she said. No, I said. Mrs. Franklin smiled. Well, I'm sure you will when the time is right. My wife looked at me and smiled that delicate smile. The one I worshipped so much, I feared would break. This story really sticks out to me because it is one of the ones that is a lot more literary in the way the story flows and the symbolic nature of the different characters and actually the plot and what happens in the story itself. Obviously, this story is about desire and how oftentimes these desires, these things that are in a lot of ways good, can actually be turned into something really, really painful if they're taken to an extreme and sort of indulged in. And obviously that's symbolized in the pigs that gorge themselves and essentially eat themselves to death. But obviously that is a metaphor for what's going on in the main character's life. He loves his wife so much to the point where he indulges everything that his wife wants, which when it comes down to it, a lot of those things are really beautiful and really great, and they're examples of a really great relationship. This main character is obviously very sacrificial in the way that he treats his wife, which is a very beautiful thing. But then at a certain point, they run into this obstacle regarding whether or not they want to start a family and when they want that to happen. And that's where it gets really tricky because it's very clear that this main character wants to have children. But because they have this conflict and because he's not able to face the conflict, he can only indulge his wife. And that's sort of his mode of living. It ends up being a very damaging thing because he's not able to face this conflict. And it comes through in sort of very subtle ways. But I enjoyed writing this story because of being able to use that symbolism in a more literary fashion that some of the other stories don't really have. I just remember when I was doing this project, sending this story to a friend of mine who is a music producer in Brooklyn, and really awesome music, a very deep sense of literary aesthetic. And when he told me that he really appreciated the story, I was like, okay, something's going right in this direction. So that was a lot of fun, and I enjoyed writing it. I think I'm pretty pleased with the symbolic and literary nature of this story, and hope you are too. Thanks so much for listening, and I hope you'll tune in next week. A Story Each Day was written by me, Nicholas Voyta Sailer. Music in this episode by Blue Dot Sessions and David Sesday. You can read more of these stories, purchase the collection, or subscribe to hear updates about my upcoming novel by going to astoryeachday.com. Thanks for listening.